Jonathan has done a really good job of organizing this for a review of the powers and duties of the school committee. So I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan and to Glenn Kuchar, who we all know by this point, which is awesome. And we'll carry on.
Oh, Joyce, you have to call us to order first, though.
Oh, do I need to call us to order? Okay. I will call the school committee to order on February 23rd at 7:16. Does that do it for you?
Yep. I think we should do our normal, I can read it if you'd like. If you don't have it handy, I'll read the
recording. I do not have it handy. Thank
yeah,
you.
I'll get it for you. Those attending tonight's meeting should be aware that the meeting is being audio and video recorded by ASRSD. Any audience members who wish to record any part of the meeting must inform the chair, who will announce the recording. This is to comply with the MA wiretap statute. The listings of matters are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. So we do have the Pledge of Allegiance on the list, and then a roll call, and then I will hand it over to Mr. Kuchar.
Everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Is that what you want to do, Jonathan?
Yes, please. Really, very quickly.
Go ahead, Jonathan. Lead it away.
All right. I guess I kind of signed up for that, didn't I?
Yes, you
I
did.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, and one nation under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Michelle, I think you've been assigned a roll call.
Mr. DeForge.
Here.
Mrs. Granger.
Here.
Mr. Leone.
Here.
Mr. Quinty.
Jim, you're muted.
Here.
Mrs. Reshoots.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons.
Here.
Thank you, everyone. Jonathan, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. So just like to, for members of the public who may not be familiar with Mr. Kuchar, Mr. Kuchar joins us this evening from MASC, which is the Massachusetts State School Committee organization. Tonight's topic will be charting the course. So any new members who are elected to school committee are asked to take this course. It's normally a one-day course, although COVID has, I know, changed that into a couple of different sessions, but because many members here have been on for 1 to 2 years or way more than that, this is sort of a review session, but also an introduction for the public who may be interested to know what roles and responsibilities the school committee has. So Mr. Kuchar is the executive director of MASC. He has served as a school committee member in the past as well. And so I will turn it over to him to lead us through.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeForge, Madam Chair, Madam Superintendent, members of the school committee. I'd like to do the screen share now if I can. And let's see, it'll just take me a second to get this ready. Get this up here, and let's go to the slideshow. And slide. And Mr. DeForge, if you want to interrupt me at any time to present a question, or if the members want to pose questions, please feel free to do that.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. We're doing a lot of this around the state right now, and I want to give you and the people who may be aspiring to the school committee a little preview of what a school committee does. The school committee in Massachusetts is an organization that really represents the heart and soul of the community. It looks after the interests of the children and their education, makes wise decisions about how it uses the district's resources, particularly their money. And it's a place where deliberation, debate, disagreement and discussion take place as an example to everyone. And it has been since the 50s, the 1650s. Massachusetts has had school committees going back into the 1600s. So basically, let's talk about what is the school committee. Its key roles, and the school committee, of course, is elected by the people. The members of the communities of Shirley and Ayer elect their members to the school committee. They are the legislature for schools for the Ayer-Shirley Regional School District. They determine the policies for the district in all its forms. Whatever's policy is for the school committee to determine. It hires, contracts with, evaluates, and oversees the superintendent as a board, not as individuals, but as a body. School committee members not only have responsibility for education, but as elected officials, you have a fiduciary responsibility, which isn't directly connected to education. That means you protect the money. You look out for the taxpayers' dollars. The taxpayers' money is not spent without the approval of the school committee, and all bills paid by the district are signed off on by a representative of the school committee. And a fiduciary responsibility is a duty of loyalty and a duty of care. You look out for the interests of your district, and you protect your district from those forces that might undermine your work. Now, we're in front of other people tonight. Is this being recorded?
Yes.
Okay, then I won't talk about protecting you from the State Department of Education. We'll save that for another time. You're also the employer of record for collective bargaining. The school committee is responsible for directing all union negotiations. And the school committees do it differently all over the state. Sometimes the school committee members are actually at the bargaining table driving the process. Sometimes they delegate that to the attorneys or the personnel directors of the district, but it's up to the school committee to decide. Also, school committee members are advocates, advocating for the children in general, advocating for the regional school district as a body. So if someone were to ask you, do I represent Ayer or Shirley? The legal answer is both. However, if you choose to set your priorities to your personal liking, that is also your right. If you want to represent taxpayers more than students, that is your right. If you want to advocate for special education more than arts and athletics, that is your right. Because you are evaluated periodically by the voters and they make the decisions, you're accountable to them. So you get to exercise your judgment. Now, the superintendent's responsibilities are this. The superintendent oversees the district on a day-to-day basis and manages the operations of the school district, subject, of course, to the policies that you set. The superintendent hires most of the staff and supervises the staff either directly or indirectly. Now, the superintendent is required to get the school committee's approval on the appointment of an assistant superintendent, the special education director, and the business manager, and school physicians and nurses. Otherwise, and the school committee appoints your district legal counsel. And the client of the legal counsel is the school committee. Otherwise, everybody else is appointed by the superintendent or appointed by someone who is subject to the oversight of the superintendent. So that includes overseeing business operations, personnel, and academic functions. And the superintendent carries out the policies that the school committee sets. The school committee administers the budget that's approved by the superintendent administers the budget that's approved by the school committee. You negotiate the union contracts and the superintendent administers them. And of course, the superintendent is also an advocate. Now, as a legislature, which is what you are, the school committee has certain operating rights and responsibilities. So, for example, the legislature represents the entire state. The regional legislature for Air Shirley represents the Air Shirley Regional School District. You determine the law, and in your district, the law is the list of operating rules and procedures and policies that you approve. Now, the school committee can have any operating rules it likes. You can use Robert's rules. You can use any one of a number of other forms of parliamentary procedures that they have. You have staggered terms that's set by your regional agreement. And you alternate your chairs, which is a decision that is a rule of your school committee, which you're entitled to set. The policies for the district, as I said, are found in a lot of places, and we'll talk about where they are. As the legislature for schools for Air Shirley, you have the special right to hire the superintendent. And the superintendent reports to the school committee as a board. As the legislature for schools, you approve the budget, you drive the budget process. And here's something that's a very interesting responsibility of the school committee. The Massachusetts Constitution gives your constituents an unrestricted right to come to you with their grievances. Any resident of the Commonwealth has the right to come to you, not only to tell you their troubles, to talk about their grievances, but to instruct you on how to resolve them. They have the right to do that. Now, you don't have the right to do that to a judge, but you do have the right to do that to an elected official. As elected officials, you don't have to do what we want, but we have the right to tell you how we think you should do your job. That is unique to the Massachusetts State Constitution that John Adams wrote almost 250 years ago. Here's another surprise for you. As elected officials, and for those people thinking about running for the school committee, just remember, if you are elected, you become legally a public figure. What that means is that your constituents can pretty much say what they want about you. They can criticize you, they can ridicule you, they can parody you. The standards for suing a constituent for libel or slander are very, very high. It's almost impossible to do. Now, in your private life, you have all the rights of a private citizen. But as a school committee member, you're a public figure and you're out there. And the school committee also works in a balance of power that it shares with the school, with the superintendent, and with the two towns. Here's what I mean. The school committee makes policy, and the superintendent administers it. The superintendent oversees spending of the budget that you've approved. The superintendent has the discrete authority to hire and manage staff. Superintendent oversees all personnel except the legal counsel. The legal counsel reports to you. And the superintendent also has the position where the public expects the superintendent to initiate certain things. For example, the superintendent will always present a draft of a proposed budget to the school committee based on your goals and objectives. And the initiative that the superintendent can take has some credibility because it's the first idea out there. Also, you evaluate the superintendent as part of your check and balance. So, and by the way, the evaluation of the superintendent is public. And all the documents related to it for the superintendent are public. Otherwise, members of the faculty and students have rights to privacy and confidentiality that need to be respected. Now, as members of the region, The towns have a say in approving your regional agreement. The towns have to approve your budget. The town may have finance committees that you must go before to explain your budget, and they have some authority around questioning. The towns control non-school operations. Somebody's got to plow the streets, provide police, provide support, public works support for your buildings. Towns can have the ability to come to the school committee. Maybe your select boards or your town meeting members come before the school committee at public comment period to air their grievances or praise you. In some districts, the town moderators appoint the school committee. That's the case in several of our vocational technical schools. And if there's a position that's vacant on your school committee, I believe the select boards and the school committee have the joint authority to fill those positions. So there's a balance. You present your budget to the town meetings. They may put conditions on your budgets. They may tell you we're approving your budget, but we don't want you to cut the hockey program, for example. On the other hand, they can't enforce that. So you can go ahead and cut the hockey program, but you've got to go back to that town meeting next year. So remember, there's a sort of delicate check and balance. And by the way, I'm not recommending cutting the hockey program. I don't want to hear from people tomorrow saying he wants to cut the hockey program. Just putting that out there. As I've said to you, who do we represent? Well, you represent the region. The school committee is the place with the table. You can host meetings to discuss issues. We can have debates among school committee members on timely topics. Many times, if the school committee didn't discuss something, it might never be discussed at all. So the school committee has a very important role in that regard as well. And there are 40 members of the Massachusetts State Legislature who started their careers as members of the school committee. So you have great credibility when speaking to your state legislators, and they have always been very respectful of local elected officials. You would advocate for your district, and I think most of you believe that you are champions for children, and that's an appropriate role when you talk about who you advocate for. So how does a school committee be effective? The key to being effective is not understanding what you can do, but what you should do. For example, free speech in Massachusetts is pretty much absolute based on the state constitution. You can attack one of your colleagues or criticize one of your colleagues vehemently. You can tell a colleague that he or she is stupid at a school committee meeting. You can do that. It's free speech, but it's not something you should do. So being a good school committee member is knowing what you should do as opposed to what you must do. You should advocate for constituents, but you should be very careful that you're not advocating for members of your family or advocating more for your own children than you would for other people's children. Good school committee members argue, and they dissent, and they criticize, but they do it in a principled way. The best example that I like to use was a debate that was held in a school district about which language to teach at the elementary grades. And there was a debate between Spanish, French. I think someone was arguing for Mandarin Chinese. There might have been another language thrown in there. The advocate for Mandarin Chinese was tolerating no disagreement. He argued, this is the language of commerce. This is going to be more important. This is what kids should be learning. Other members said, yes, but the second most frequently spoken language in our district is Spanish. We should probably teach Spanish to build harmony in the community. And the advocate for Mandarin Chinese said, well, go ahead, be stupid, do what you want. That's not principled dissent. However, one of the advocates for French said, I respectfully disagree. French is the language of diplomacy, the language of literature. I know the majority is going to decide on Spanish, but I hope at some point we'll rethink that and maybe see what the best course of action is. That's principled dissent and that's principled disagreement. And it's healthy. And the public will hear it from you and they might not hear it anywhere else. Be transparent with the school committee rules. Now, here's where the chair has a very special responsibility. The chair, according to Robert's Rules of Order, the chair is the servant of the body. The chair represents the people who could be at the meeting tonight and the people who couldn't make it. The chair represents the representatives of Air and Shirley, who might be watching and who might not be watching. The chair is the play-by-play announcer for the school committee meeting because people watching the meeting aren't as parliamentarily savvy as you are. So the chair is responsible for being impartial, unbiased, and running an efficient meeting. We do whole workshops on parliamentary procedures, but I'll just tell you, the chair has very few legal responsibilities except to preside over the meeting, to call for order. If someone refuses to be orderly, the chair can direct them to leave the meeting. And the meeting is not over until the school committee votes to adjourn and the chair declares that the meeting is adjourned. Until your chair does that, the meeting is not over. Good school committees have priorities and goals and link them together when they do a budget, so it makes sense. Good school committees collaborate. If the relationship between the school committee and the superintendent deteriorates, the faculty picks up on that right away. Parents pick up on it, and bad behaviors ensue. Being a good school committee member respects confidentiality. Remember, what's in executive session is confidential for a reason. Executive sessions are very strictly regulated by the state. Students have the right to privacy, as do members of your faculty. Sometimes the superintendent will not be able to tell you why a certain educator is not coming back, or why someone has been placed on leave, or why a student has been suspended or expelled. That can be a confidential matter, and the superintendent's responsible for protecting those kids. And good school committees have good meeting protocols, guidance for public comment period. Some of you have curfews. Some of you have public comment period at different times during the meeting. Sometimes school committees limit the number of times members can speak. Whatever it might be, efficient meetings are very important. Meetings don't have to run until midnight. Some effective strategies is for the chair to run an efficient meeting, for the agenda to be designed with purpose so that the meeting is run efficiently. And by the way, the chair is the servant of the assembly and the agenda is the property of the school committee. So if the school committee gives the chair some items for the agenda and the chair says, I'm not putting that on the agenda, the school committee by majority vote can put it on the agenda. By majority rules, you can, with a majority vote, overturn a ruling of the chair. I'm not encouraging you to do that, but I'm just saying that's how it works in a democracy. I'm assuming you have a public comment period. Most districts have protocols for public comment. We have to be very careful that you don't exclude somebody from commenting because you don't like what they're going to say or because you disagree with them. We've had some litigation, in Massachusetts around that. And people have a right to speak freely within the parameters that you set. So for example, you might say we'll have public comment period on the items before the school committee tonight or something related to school. If you were in my hometown of Cambridge, you might have public comment period to discuss the war in Afghanistan or the seizure of the Capitol or the ducks on the Charles River, whatever it might be. They have a wide open meeting. That's a local decision. Efficient meetings work through motions and parliamentary procedures, with the chair explaining it to people as you go along. And efficient meetings have ways of avoiding long speeches and long-windedness. I'm the person who sat at a school committee meeting with a member who spoke for 45 minutes to an empty room. These things happen. The public is watching. You have a limited amount of time to convince people to listen to you. In fact, those of you on the school committee, you sort of professionalize the art of going to meetings. You can tell pretty quickly if a speaker who's talking to you about a subject knows their stuff. You can generally watch a public figure on television give a speech and understand just the degree of BS that you might be about to listen to or not. You acquire that skill. The public doesn't have that skill as to the extent that you do. And many school committees have appropriate norms and protocols about how the meeting will run and how people are respectful to each other. As I said to you earlier, dissent and disagreement are important. I'm stunned at how many people don't remember Hubert Humphrey. I'm sorry that they don't, but he was Vice President of the United States and 50 years ago. And he said, dissent and disagreement are the anvil upon which our democracy is forged. Argument is good. Dissent is good. The public will respect you if they hear you debating and discussing different perspectives. If you use Robert's Rules of Order, just know that Robert's Rules prohibits attacks against another person. Constitution of Massachusetts allows them. So it's up to you to use your good judgment. Now, key to the school committee's role is knowing their policy-making role. The policy-making role deals with the what. What are we going to do? How much are we going to spend? The how is for the superintendent. How will we implement the school committee's directives? Now, we do these trainings in explaining to the school committee what their responsibilities are for policy and where policy is found. And we do a lot of them on Saturdays. And we might have 60 or 70 people in the room. And we run through the list of where policy is. And you'd be surprised at all the different places where policy is. And we explain it to them. And then around Wednesday of that week, I start getting calls from the superintendent saying, you told them what? Well, this is one of the things we tell you. Where to look for policy. Your district policy manual, where you probably have all your policies in some form of order. And there are hundreds and hundreds of potential areas of policy that a school committee can have. Your student handbooks include policy, your discipline policy, your attendance policy, your grading policy. Some of it's administration, but some of it is policy. Your union contracts represent a big part of your personnel policy and very detailed and very long parts of your policy. If you have a strategic plan, your strategic plan and your goals, mission, and vision, which are part of the strategic plan, are all policy. Let me just quickly say to people who think they know what a strategic plan is in your community, a strategic plan is nothing more than a series of goals and a timeline for you to achieve them, with a definition of what success will look like and the delegation of responsibility to the people whom are responsible for putting it together. You can do your own strategic plans. You don't have to pay some consultant $75,000 to do a strategic plan for you. It's not that complicated. But there are people who make a lot of money doing it. Your school committee minutes frequently contain motions, that represent policy. You know, after 9/11, we had a ton of districts adopting motions to prohibit out-of-state travel. Some of you have already done that regarding travel for COVID. That actually is policy, even if it doesn't make it into your policy manual. Occasionally, you'll file for grants, state grants or federal grants. Those grants may involve the district making commitments to certain programs or students. So it's a policy question because it involves money and it involves general policy. Occasionally, if you get sued and you have to defend yourself in court, you want to make sure that when your legal counsel is in court, they're representing the policies that you have set. So the briefs that legal counsel may provide on your behalf are the equivalent of policy. The directives of the superintendent carrying out your policy have the effect of policy. Joyce, you have a question?
Glenn, so going back to the legal documents
Mhm.
filed for you by your counsel, do you have a little bit more expansive description of that?
And I'll give you an example. I'll
Yeah.
give you an example. Several years ago in one of our cities, they needed a director for their cafeteria. And they had several applications. One of them from somebody who had 30 years in food service. One of them who had a master's degree in counseling. One of them had worked in the cafeteria for many years. And another one who had had several jobs in the school district for over 40 years. The collective bargaining agreement said that all things being equal, you have to hire the most senior person. But the superintendent appointed the person with the master's degree in counseling. So the unsuccessful applicants filed grievances, arguing that the collective bargaining agreement wasn't followed. Well, it ended up going all the way to the state Supreme Judicial Court because the argument was arbitrators don't get to appoint anybody, and under education reform, the superintendent's professional judgment trumps everything. But we had no litigation on it. So this particular city filed a brief with the Supreme Judicial Court, and then they asked us if we would file an amicus brief supporting them. So we looked at their brief, and their brief said the school committee has no role in personnel. Our brief, on the other hand, said, yes, it does. It has collective bargaining responsibilities. The school committee approves job descriptions. The school committee budgets for personnel. And the school committee can deal with the grievances that get to the school committee level. That's not nothing. But the brief by that city would have given up all those rights, and the Supreme Judicial Court might not have known better because they didn't read the brief before their lawyer filed it on their behalf. On the other hand, the Supreme Judicial Court plagiarized our brief almost literally and established all of those rights for the school committee. Now, that's a pretty long-winded way of getting to it, and I hope you're never before the SJC on a big appeal. But if anything's filed on your behalf, you know, if the people in that city had reviewed that brief carefully, the school committee would have said, no, that's not the argument we want to make. We want to make the argument that we have a meaningful role in policy and personnel, but that the superintendent's professional judgment is what counts. Now, past practices sometimes acquire the status of policy. If the day after Thanksgiving has been a holiday for 150 years, it should probably stay that way. If the chair of the school committee has given out graduation diplomas every year since Lincoln was president, that has the effect of policy. It's because for years and years you do something and you had a past practice, it could acquire the status of policy. It could. Your regional agreement has policy in it. It talks about when you run, when your elections are held, how your budget protocols go ahead. And your city or town charters may affect, depending upon where you are. The town charter may affect how you're elected locally, and your budget certainly is your fiscal policy. That's all policy, a lot of things to look at. So sometimes the administrative responsibilities of the superintendent and the authority of the school committee intersect, and the roles are in some cases, it's really hard to tell the difference. Let me give you some examples. Communicating with staff. Now, if a constituent comes to you with a problem, I'm making this up, but let's say I come to you and I say, I live in Air, my child is in the X grade, my child's teacher is terrible, and they're going to give you the world's biggest lie that you hear. I voted for you, and I want you to fix this problem. And what do? You know, I complain to you that the principal doesn't know what he's doing, and the teacher is terrible, and that's going on, and everybody's upset. What are you going to do about it? Well, the person who does do the supervising is the superintendent. Theoretically, you should report that to the superintendent and just say to the superintendent, I'm hearing complaints from parents. Here's what they are. I'm delivering it to you. And wait and see how it works itself out. Now, the superintendent can't always talk to you about a problem with a faculty member or even a problem with a student. But then the question is, why can't you as a school committee member speak directly to the principal? He's talked about free speech earlier. And the answer is, you can speak directly to the principal. You can talk directly to teachers. You can ask them questions, but it's very, very risky behavior because what you say to them may not be what they hear. I once told a parent, okay, you've referred to me the problem with your child's teacher. I'm going to alert the superintendent and ask the superintendent to get back to you. Well, that's what I said, but the rumor that was circulated immediately afterwards was, I told that parent we're going to get that teacher. And that wasn't what happened. But you lose control of these conversations. Plus, you have to be very careful that you don't attempt to use your authority as a member of the board to act in a sort of what's called an inherently coercive manner. The principal knows who you are, the teachers know who you are. You never want to say, do you know who I am? But that's a particular example. Another great example was the issue of what language you're going to teach in the elementary grades. The superintendent said, that's for me to decide. I'm the superintendent, and I think we're going to teach Spanish. And a member of the school committee in Fall River said, well, but the second most frequently spoken language here in Fall River is Portuguese. And culturally, civically, we think Portuguese is important. So who prevails? The law doesn't give you a lot of guidance. So the best school committees work it out. And we advise superintendents to pick your battles carefully. But we also tell school committees to be very careful as well. Dealing with town-wide issues and protocols, what happens if the Public Works Department isn't clearing your streets effectively? Who do you go to? Do you go to the superintendent, or do you take your grievance to the select board or the town manager? Again, you can talk to anybody you like. This is America, free speech, but you have to take responsibility for your communications, and it can be very risky if you're not careful about it. Resolving union and management disputes. There's a protocol for that. It's called the grievance procedure. Some school committees are the last appeal of a grievance under the contract. Others are not. It depends on how you decide to write your collective bargaining agreement. With regard to your fiduciary responsibilities, this has very little directly to do with education, but a lot to do in the larger picture. You get your recommendations from the superintendent. You're going to be getting a budget recommendation, if you haven't already, pretty soon. Here's what makes budgeting so challenging. At this point, we don't really know how much money is going to be available to you for the next fiscal year that begins in July. We just don't know. There are so many unknowns and so many variables. Congress is debating another, I think, $1.8 trillion worth of money, that some of which will go to state and local aid. We don't know where that's going to go. I don't know how you're supposed to set a budget by your deadline, but you have to get something to the town meeting. It will start with the superintendent and it will end with you. The school committee will, by a 2/3 vote, send the budget to your town meetings. And once both your towns have approved the budget, then you have a working bottom line. You can alter the spending within your bottom line during the year because you need some measure of flexibility. But most school committees will also include explanatory language in their budget that says, here's the budget, so much is going for different categories of expenditures, and so much is going, we're going to create a new program at the high school, we're going to create an elementary foreign language program. A lot of districts still don't have full-day kindergarten, we're going to have full-day kindergarten, whatever it might be. You put that instruction in the budget language, and the superintendent will administer it and is bound to do that based on your fiduciary responsibility. Now, what are the key drivers of the budget? What are the things you need to worry about as you plan for next year? Well, your union contracts may have already negotiated raises for next year, or you may be renewing your contract and you'd have to negotiate new ones. So your collective bargaining agreements affect your budget. Health insurance is always a big expense. Special education costs, particularly sending kids out of district for services out of district, can be very costly. We don't know how much regional transportation aid is going to be available. Those are some of the major issues that affect your budget, and it's hard to predict. But the strange part of this is you will need to get a budget to your town meetings before the legislature finalizes the state budget. How counterintuitive is that? But it's just what we have to deal with. And we do our best. And people are probably watching us saying, what did he just say? What is he smoking? What is he? It's not the way we can budget at home, but it's the way we have no alternative but to do that. So where does the money come from? Well, it comes from some different places. The first place it comes from is a grant from the state that is explained in Chapter 70 of the Massachusetts General Laws. It's about 8 pages of very small print. Very few people understand exactly how it works, but I'm going to give you a presentation briefly to show you how it does. So you have Chapter 70 money, and that's going to get you about maybe $13 million a year. There is a special education program that gives you coverage for extremely high cost cases. For example, if you have to place a student out of your district, some students go to 24-hour placements, 365 days a year, cost over $100,000. If you do, there's a program that the state has that provides relief for those high cost cases, so that you can share that expense with the state. There's regional transportation money that the state provides to underwrite the cost of your school buses. There are some other smaller state grants, nutrition, planning, MCAS prep, a whole range of other small accounts that there exist. There's some federal money out there. Title I provides a lot of money for kids who are economically disadvantaged. IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's the special education statute. The federal government will give you maybe 12% of your special education budget, which is not the 40% that they originally promised back when the law was adopted. There'll be some COVID money coming. As I said, there could be a lot of COVID money coming. And there are a bunch of other federal grants out there, including vocational technical grants, arts funding, dozens of additional small federal programs that can provide you with some money. And of course, your largest source of revenue is probably property taxes from your member towns. Then you may have a stabilization fund or an excess and deficiency account that provides you with some money. You may assess fees to your students for certain items. And you may have some benefactors who've left money for you. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but some of our towns, older towns, do have that. I would like to explain to you how the state elects to give you money. Now, bear with me for a second because I want to go to a second document here. And I don't know where it went, but give me a minute and I will find it. It's a Chapter 70 explanation. Let's make sure I don't lose you here. Stop the share. I'm going to go to, yes, there should be another document on my stick. Bear with me because this is important. And I'll be sending this to you to take a look at. Doesn't seem to be coming up. Let's try again. It's somewhere out here. Let's see where it is. Here we are. Okay. Can you see my screen now? Is that?
Nope.
We need to go to the screen share. Let's go to screen share, and here we are. Okay. Can you all see what I have here? Let's see. Here we go. Let's get rid of that. Make this bigger if we can. And let's see if we can make the screen a little bigger. Okay. This is the foundation budget for Ayer Shirley. Let me explain what the foundation budget is. The state determines how much money you need to run your district. Then the state determines how much of that amount you can afford to pay, and the state will give you the difference. So here's how the state determines what you need to run your district. They create this grid. I'm sure you can see this arrow moving around your screen, and you can see that the state puts all the different elements of a school budget over here along the left side of the screen. I'm assuming you can see it. I can't see you, so I'm making that assumption.
Well, that looks pretty good, Glenn.
Yeah, we can see you.
You see it? Okay, into this spreadsheet, the state also puts your students in the grades where they belong. So you have 8 preschoolers, 5 half-day kindergartners, 114 full-day students, 644 elementary students, 419 middle students, and 458 kids at the high school. If you add all these figures, columns 1 through 7, you will get 1,642 kids in your district. at the current time. It may be off by a bit, but that's irrelevant at the moment. The state also determines how much of your kids are economically disadvantaged. So about a third of your kids are technically economically disadvantaged. You have 9 English language learners at the middle grades, 8 at the high school, and 43 at the elementary school. You have 63 students who require special education services and 16 students who are out of district. Now, all of these numbers are correct, except these two. These are estimates based on about 4% of your student body here and 1% of your student body here. Into the grid, the state takes all of your expenses and multiplies them by the dollar figure allowed to the students. So if you could, you see this figure that I'm pointing to, 2,161,902. You all see that?
Yeah.
All right, you get that number by multiplying the number of elementary students, which is 644, by the state's average per pupil expense for classroom teachers and specialists in the elementary grades. I don't know what that number is, but it's the same pretty much for every district. But what they do is they multiply the number of students by all the different per pupil expenditures for all of these categories. Excuse me. Then a double count, they give you an allocation for special education students and you're out of district kids. So you get an extra $1,700 for special education and an extra $500 in expenses for special ed. And your English language learners also count extra, and your low-income kids count extra. They all count double here. So your total expenses, theoretically, are $19,290,000, $19,290,629. Now, I don't know what your real budget is, but this is what the state has proclaimed is adequate. Do any of you know whether you expend above this amount?
Yes, we are closer to $30 million, if not over 30.
$30 million budget. Okay, so then you might argue that the foundation budget really isn't an adequate budget. You think you spend $30 million? Okay. Now, let me compare Ayers Shirley, which spends an average of $11,748. Let's compare Ayers Shirley with a similar size community, Athol Royalston. Their average is $12,868. Why is it so much more than your average? Because as you can see, they have 868 poor kids. More than 50% of their district is economically disadvantaged, where only about a third of your district is economically disadvantaged. So as a result, Athol Royalston argues that they need more state aid, and the state provides more state aid. So let's find out how much state aid you are expected to get this coming year. Ayers Shirley is expected to get $8,350,000 out of a foundation budget of $19,290,000, or 31% of your budget, 43% of your budget comes from the state. But let's take a look at Athol Royalston. What percent of their budget comes from the state? 84.72%. They're going to get 18 million of their $21 million budget. What's the reason for that? The reason for that is that Athol Royalston is economically disadvantaged to a greater extent than you are. Now let me go back to stop the share. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint and we'll go back here. Are we sharing this now or are we not?
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Are you seeing the screen share?
Nope.
All right, let me hang on a second and let me go back here and go to here. Here we are, and screen share, and back here. Okay. So as you can see, Chapter 70 can be relatively controversial. It's controversial because most of us believe there's not enough money in the pot. And I don't know of any district who feels it's treated fairly. Everybody feels they're more economically disadvantaged than the state. And everybody argues that they're screwed compared to the next district over. It's just, but in theory, that's how it works. And that's the sort of 5-minute explanation of something that takes a long time otherwise to explain. When you're done with your budget, you tell the superintendent where you want the money to go, and the superintendent needs to come back to you for your approval if those items need to change. And that's the reason that the school committee signs off on all the bills that are paid, because you have a fiduciary responsibility to do that. You monitor progress during the year. Superintendent will provide you with budget updates, and you can monitor the data to see how well you're doing. The superintendent will provide you with student performance data so that you can see whether you're getting to your goals. And as you see, there's the balance. The school committee provides leadership through governance. The superintendent does it through management. The school committee is the bridge between the superintendent and the community. The superintendent is the bridge between the school committee and the staff. The school committee manages its own conflict amongst themselves. The superintendent is responsible for communicating what gets done so that a good flow of information goes back and forth.
Mr. Kuchar, just one moment. I think Joyce has another question.
Okay, Joyce?
Joyce, you're not unmuted yet.
So going back to finances for a minute, and I know this came up a couple of years ago, and I just wonder, and we're not in that position, which is good, but just wondering what how you would do it. So a number of years ago, everybody got slashed on their regional transportation money. And what do you do when you're in the middle of budget season? I mean, you're out of budget season because you've already gone to your town and everything. And now the money that you think is coming in from the state, whether it's Chapter 70 or your regional transportation or your SPED numbers come in much higher, and you have to deal with that. What are your, what resources do you have other than moving money from here to there and closing the gym?
You've raised the biggest challenge of the age. It hasn't changed in a lot of years. There are no easy answers, but this year, I would just tell you to watch carefully how much of the COVID stimulus money is made available to districts to get us through the year. Massachusetts is going to get a lot of money. 1.9 or 1.8 trillion dollars translates into as much as 3 or 4 billion dollars for Massachusetts. And we're hoping to get as much of that as we can to help deal with the chaos that has happened in this unprecedented year. So what I would just say to you is stand by, because in the next few weeks, we're going to be able to, we'll see how much relief is coming. But for those people who are watching for the first time, you realize nobody runs for the school committee for the joy of cutting services to kids. So the notion of having to balance a budget and having to cut positions and cut services means that over the last few years, we've seen cuts to the arts, cuts to electives at high school, cuts in transportation, imposition of fees, and other issues that make school committee members less popular than they would like to be with their constituents. Now,
So I mean, at any time, this year is going to be, is so different, but we did have that with that regional transportation, what, 7 years ago?
yeah,
Where people had counted on it and it went to like zero. And your only option then is to cut services and to cut stuff out of your budget, right? There's no other way to do it because the towns are already financed and already budgeted. They're not going to have anything.
and it's very hard to do when you have contracts that bind you to certain expenses that you can't get out from under.
Right. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
A quick word about what good school committees do with regard to transparency, just by way of a brief introduction. The school committee is subject to the open meeting law, which means you have to post your meetings. The public has the right to know that you're meeting, where and when, and how to access that. Of course, we're a little more flexible with who can Zoom and who can't. Now it's pretty much universal Zoom, but you still have to give 48 hours notice. The agenda for the meeting needs to identify those items which the chair reasonably anticipates will be discussed. The school committee majority cannot deliberate and discuss school issues anywhere but a public meeting. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, there are 7 of you?
6.
There are 6 of you, okay. I knew that. The majority of you is 4. So 3 of you could meet at Dunkin' Donuts and cut a deal about what you want to do on the budget. You haven't broken the law because it's not a majority of the committee. But if a 4th member walks in and joins the conversation, you're now breaking the law because you have a 4th person entering the deliberation. And the majority rule applies not only live and in person, but in serial communications. So if 4 of you speak to each other separately and individually, that's still an open meeting law violation unless it's at the meeting. So you want to be very careful about discussing issues anywhere other than in public. You can meet in executive session, but only for certain reasons. And when you do meet in executive session, the public has the right to know why, and you need to vote by roll call to convene an executive session, and you need to tell the public whether or not you're coming back out. Now, the school committee can meet in executive session for a limited number of purposes. You can discuss the character and reputation of individuals, but not their professional competence. You can discuss their physical and mental health, but not their professional competence. And you can discuss disciplining or dismissing or hearing complaints about somebody, but not their professional competence. By that I mean, if someone is alleged to have been unprofessional, if someone's character is impugned, if someone is physically unable to do a job, you can discuss those items because of the private nature of what they are in executive session. But the people that you're talking about have the right to be present, to speak, to be represented, and to record the meeting. So you can't convene an executive session for reasons 1 or 2 without the permission of the people about whom you are speaking. Now, you don't have to do it in executive session. You can talk about somebody's character and reputation in public if you wish. But but the people have privacy rights for items 1 and 2. Discussions around collective bargaining strategies, discussions around litigation that exist, not that's threatened, but that exists, and bargaining with the unions and non-union personnel can be done in executive session. Deployment of security devices can be discussed in executive session. You don't want people knowing how your security system works. If criminal misconduct is going to be discussed, you can do that in executive session. You don't necessarily want the bad guys knowing that you're onto them. Purchasing, leasing, and exchanging real property can be done in executive session. You don't want to give up your bargaining positions to whoever the seller or the buyer may be. Item number 7, if there's a special law or a grant that requires an executive session, you may do that. For example, anything involving the privacy rights of students can be discussed in executive session because we have privacy laws. We have laws about disclosing health-related issues. You can meet with a mediator in executive session. And number 9, you're about to do this, you can have a superintendent search committee that can meet in executive session. Number 10, you can also discuss patents and trademarks if you wish. Sometimes you'll have a vendor who will not want to discuss how their product works in public, and you might want to have that in executive session. The other element of this fear of God section is dealing with the state ethics law. As newly elected school committee members, you'll have to engage the Ethics Commission in getting an electronic briefing, very similar to what we're going to go through right now. And you'll have to take a test, which you cannot fail, because if you get the wrong multiple choice answer right or wrong, you get another chance until you get it right. So, but it is instructive. You have 2 kinds of ethics that apply to you. The state law is law, and it's mandatory. The voluntary code of ethics for school boards in the United States, which is adopted by the National School Boards Association and MASC, is voluntary. And that talks about being responsible for children, focusing on policy making, being collegial. Remember to speak for yourself and not for the board if you're speaking to anyone, including the press. Think carefully before you speak because you can't take the words back. Respect the chain of command, respect confidentiality, be thoughtful, and be an advocate. Now that's all very nice, but it's unenforceable. And just some advice for you, never, ever, ever put the code of ethics in a collective bargaining agreement with the unions. Because the first time they believe that you're not being collegial or that you are not looking out for the interests of children, they'll file a grievance and argue the code of ethics. So you want to be careful about that. There are 4 parts to the state ethics law that we want to brief you quickly on. Item number 1, just so that you know, a bribe is very, very bad. You don't want to take a bribe. You don't want to offer a bribe. A bribe is something that's given or received directly or indirectly to get you to do something. You vote for my cousin for the special education director's job, I will give you $1,000. That is a bribe. But it doesn't even have to be money. If I'm a transportation company and I say, don't worry, hire me to be a transportation company and your kids will always get a ride not only to school, but home from school, even if you're not entitled to one. That's also bribes inevitably end up in prison sentences. Not good. You can be fined or you can be criminally sanctioned. Now there's a legal cousin to the bribe. It's called the gratuity. Sort of like a tip. You can take a gift as a school committee member, as long as there's no quid pro quo, as long as you don't have to do anything for it. So if someone says to you, I've opened up a restaurant in town, I'd like you to come, here's a $25 gift certificate, you can take that as long as there's no quid pro quo. You can accept a gift for being who you are. The same applies to teachers and school employees. Anything over $50 is illegal. Anything under $50 is acceptable. And if you are a teacher, your class is allowed to aggregate a gift of up to $150. The Ethics Commission makes these rules. They are strictly enforced. The Ethics Commission also loves people who rat out other people. So if you think someone's taking a bribe, call the Ethics Commission. They'll be happy to take the information. They will not tell you what they're doing with it, but they'll be happy to take the information. Also, nepotism. This is very important. This is where we find most of our violations. You shouldn't participate in any matter in which the financial interest of you, your family, your partner, your business organization that you're affiliated with, or someone with whom you're negotiating employment has a financial interest. A real good example, we had a lightning storm one night, blew out the fuse box outside one of the schools. The only electrician who could fix it was a school committee member's brother. School committee member's brother fixed it, billed the district. When it came time to pay the bill, school committee member signed the warrant. Should not have signed the warrant because it was an immediate family member. Somebody else should have signed the warrant. There are some exceptions to this, but they're very limited. So we can get into that in just a minute. Now, there's also a request, which in the form of a requirement that says, if there is the appearance of conflict of interest, you should disclose the appearance of conflict of interest and explain why it's not a conflict. For example, your name is McGillicuddy. Somebody named McGillicuddy is nominated to be the SPED director. You explain that we're different McGillicuddys, we're not related. You've dispelled the appearance of the conflict of interest. Now, who's your immediate family member? If any of these people are involved in their economic interest is at stake, stay out of it. That includes you and your spouse or partner. And for both of you, your siblings, your parents, and your children. Even if they're not your children, they might be your spouse's children from a previous marriage. They're still your conflict of interest. So it's you and your spouse or partner, both of your parents, both of your children, and your siblings of your spouse and your siblings. Now, look at this exception. Your wife's brother is a conflict of interest. Okay, your wife's brother. Your sister's husband is not a conflict of interest because there's no blood relationship here between you and your spouse or partner. So that's how the conflict of interest is defined. Keep this chart handy, it may be helpful to you. There are some other things that you need to be careful of, and they're listed here. You should be very careful that you don't act in a manner that could be considered acting with bias. If there is, you should file a disclosure form explaining why you're not biased. But the example I gave you is one. You should not secure unwanted privileges for yourself or others. So for example, if you want to rent the school gym for a child's birthday party, you rent it under the same situation that any other citizen would rent the gym. You pay the fee anybody else would pay. You don't seek exemptions and you don't jump in line. Using inherently coercive authority, don't threaten anyone. Don't say, do you know who I am? Now do what I want. It's inherently coercive authority. I'll give you some other examples in a moment. Using official resources for private or personal use. For example, don't reproduce your campaign literature on the superintendent's Xerox machine. Not a good idea. Disclosing confidential information is an ethics violation. And accepting inherently incompatible employment. I'll give you an example of incompatible employment. It's very rare for school employees, but if you were a police officer, you should not be accepting a job as a security guard, guarding an area where a community where you are a police officer, because then you'd be guarding your own territory, and that's a conflict of interest. Here's some cases of inherently coercive authority. We had a situation once where a school committee member fired the basketball coach after the first half and coached the second half himself. That was not a good idea. We had a retired firefighter on the school committee, knowing that there was going to be a fire drill, took control of the building away from the superintendent and supervised a fire drill in one of our communities. That's inherently coercive authority, usurping responsibilities of the faculty, or pressuring the faculty to provide special treatment for other students. That's a sort of general outline of the role of the school committee. Now I'm going to and see if you have any questions. And anybody out there, the MASC has a listed telephone number. The cell phone numbers for the staff are available on our website. We all take our own calls. Anybody who wants to call MASC is entitled to call us and ask us questions. We give the same answers to everybody who calls, and we don't get involved in those situations that we're not present to witness. So, if a private citizen calls and says the school committee did something outrageous last night, that's not a discussion we're going to have. But if a school committee member calls and says, I have an issue, please assist me.
Glenn, I have a question.
Jim.
Yeah. In our agendas, we have in one of the earlier bullets, we have kind of like a community forum thing where people can come on and speak their mind for like 3 minutes about any of the issues of the day.
Okay.
And I've always taken those to bring certain issues up, but I always thought that we wouldn't deliberate on it because they may bring out issues that currently aren't on the agenda. But I always thought it was okay that we can ask any questions we want to clarify their concerns and then consider what they have for a future agenda item. Are we allowed to deliberate openly anything that the public brings up?
If the public raises an issue, you can certainly discuss it with them. You can add to the agenda any item that the chair cannot reasonably anticipate would be coming up at the meeting. However, the discussion about whether it's a good idea to engage the public during public comment period is a discussion you want to have with your colleagues. Some people think it's a good idea. Some people think it's a terrible idea, especially if somebody who is pathologically argumentative shows up at your school committee meeting and decides to discharge the contents of their mind and argue with you. It may not be the most productive use of your time, so some school committees say, we will not respond.
Right.
I've seen meetings get hijacked in ways that aren't very helpful, especially when someone tries to get you to discuss something that needs to be investigated. For example, if someone says, what are you doing about the lack of morale at the Johnson Elementary School? Well, somebody's just tossed a bomb into the meeting and, do you really want to say, oh, please tell me more? Or do you want to get into a debate about, no, there isn't a morale problem? You want to say the superintendent will take this under advisement and we'll deal with it appropriately. But it's just a judgment call. You can have
Right.
whatever rules the committee likes.
Okay.
So following up on that, Glenn, so someone says something like, I noticed all the windows are broken in the gym. And that's not on your agenda, and you need to investigate that before you could possibly give an answer, because you didn't know the windows
Oh,
were.
that's why you might not respond.
Yeah,
And you don't know that the windows really are broken in the gym. Joe, did you have a hand up?
I was waving to my grandson.
Oh, okay.
Who was he was zooming. He was FaceTiming from Colorado, so I was just waving to him.
Oh, okay. If he was in the
Sorry.
room- If he was in the room, I love telling other people's kids they can stay up until 11, you know.
He can because he's in Colorado, so it'll only be 9 there.
Any other questions?
So can I ask a quick question, Glenn?
You may.
So when you were talking about the executive session items that are acceptable to discuss, and you talked about there was character and then there was yeah. Can you just kind of give examples of what is okay and what isn't?
Well, if you're talking about somebody's character and reputation, you can convene an executive session. So let's say that I'm making this up. The director of out-of-state travel in your school district. You think that the director of out-of-state travel is incompetent and lies to the school committee and mishandles money for one's own gain. A whole litany of things. You're making allegations against someone. You're questioning their character and reputation. They may want that discussed in executive session. You don't, especially if there's nothing to it, you need to protect people's reputations. There was a very, I don't want to get salacious on you, but one of the most important situations that I actually was aware of, we had a district where a teacher and a definitely underaged student were found to be in a vehicle, happened to be in the Harvard Square area of Cambridge, engaged in inappropriate behaviors, and this was brought to the attention of the school district. The family of the perpetrator had some political clout and decided that the school committee should let it go because we're who we are and this doesn't happen to us. And the school committee said, well, wait a minute. This is conduct unbecoming a teacher. This is not acceptable. Yes, but I'm so-and-so. I don't want this discussed. And ultimately, the family refused to negotiate with the school committee. So the school committee decided, okay, we're going to have an executive session about this. And then the school committee decided, you know what? You're being so difficult about this and so arrogant about this. We're not going to have it in executive session. The family said, oh, we want it in executive session now. And the school committee said, you know what? No. So they protected the identity of the victim, and the individual was terminated and never worked again in a public school. But theoretically, that could have been held in executive session. It could have been a totally false charge of mistaken identity, and the alleged perpetrator might have wanted an executive session to prove one's innocence. There are many instances where superintendents will bring to the attention of the school committee people who are physically or mentally unable to continue teaching and need to negotiate an exit. They may bring that to executive session because it's physical or mental health, with the agreement of the person being discussed.
Okay.
The annals of executive session lore are lengthy.
So, to follow up on that, so in executive session, if you discuss the character or anything like that of an employee, they have the right to be there
They have the right to be
and
present.
a lawyer.
They have the right to be represented. They have the right to speak. And they have the right to record the session.
Okay,
So,
so what about it in public open session?
The public open
is-
session, you can always be represented and anybody can speak.
But anybody can say anything about anybody they want in
Well,
open session?
assuming, I mean, the chair can run the meeting and the chair can legitimately say, we use Robert's Rules of Order, and an attack on another person where it is out of order for us to protect the rights of the people that you're attacking. So the chair could rule that person out of order.
Okay,
And the school committee could overrule the chair if they wanted to.
so if you hear that someone, usually sometimes you have an executive session and all you have to do is invite that person if you're going to discuss, like, let's say, we have a superintendent that wants to get rid of someone who is not mentally able to do their job. So to avoid what you would have in the community,
That can be
To have-
held in executive session
it would be helpful to have an executive
Yeah.
session with that person and their lawyer.
if it's a matter for the school committee. Now, normally the superintendent would take care of that within the authority of the superintendent, and it might never go to the school committee
Right.
unless you had to negotiate a special severance package of some kind, or it's entirely possible that the superintendent wants to report to you about something that happened in school and needs to protect the identity of the people being discussed with their consent.
So you can do
And-
that in executive session.
It could be.
and where does public outcry fall into that category?
Well, the public can raise whatever objections it wishes, and you are the judge of determining whether the public outcry warrants a public session or not. There are privacy rights that you just can't
Yeah,
violate.
yeah,
You know, I mean, a lot of people are getting sick with COVID and they're outraged, but that doesn't mean that they can force doctors to talk about their patients. And the superintendent really can't talk to you about another person's child or a teacher who is going through disciplinary procedures or even health problems without the consent of the people to have that discussion shared. We have districts that don't publish the honor roll anymore because it's a student's record and it's private.
Ah,
Right.
interesting.
So there are no other questions, or are there?
I'm good.
No, I think this was good. I think we'll get it, obviously we have the recording here. We'll put as long as you're okay with it, Glenn, we'll put the presentation up. So
Mhm.
reference it and certainly the follow-up, maybe we'll have you back.
Well, this,
We'll figure something out.
when everybody's back, maybe you might want to host a regional new member orientation.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I've even, forgotten some of the stuff along the way here, so this was a good refresher, and
Absolutely.
I think part of it is nice. I know when I did my charting the course, I was maybe 6 weeks into being a school committee member, and after I think it would almost be good if you were in practice going back every 1 to 2 years, because then you can take, and what I found myself doing tonight was applying what you were talking about to what we've gone through over, my case, 6 years, right? Like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Oh, okay, we should do things, you have that practical application. So I appreciate you coming to join us tonight and giving up some of your time to help us out.
Glenn, one last, if you could clarify one thing, it was in the last statement that you made, you were talking about posting honor rolls. Now, in our graduations, we typically have, highest honors, high honors, honors. Is that inappropriate?
It's not inappropriate, but if you're not on the honor roll and you're not listed, everybody knows you're not on the honor roll.
Right.
And there are those who might argue that that violates their privacy rights. It's a local call.
Okay. All right.
At the same time, giving awards to kids is, you kind of want to know that their awards are there to be given, first of all. I don't know.
I don't think anybody's ever really objected too strenuously to recognizing the good things that kids do.
Glenn, I actually just thought of a question. You may not have anything to do with it or not, but where does MASC stand, or have they even taken a stand on school districts that are trying to change their mascot names?
You're talking about AB.
Well,
That's a local decision. I will just tell you this. I was on a school committee where such, with Cambridge Ringe and Latin used to be two separate high schools, Cambridge Latin and Ringe Tech. And Ringe Tech were the Ringe Warriors. And the Ringe alumni, first of all, fought the merger of the school and fought the loss of their Warrior logo that they had used for, Ringe Tech was 1885 where it was started. It's an argument nobody can win. However, after the schools were merged and after the logo was changed, everybody quickly moved on. That's the lesson I would give you. Whatever you do.
I just wonder where school is. Do they have a stand on it? So they're not.
No.
School committee. Does school committee get involved in that?
We rarely get involved except to advise people parliamentarily, or to give them, some sort of friendly guidance such as I have just offered to you.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
But in terms of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, it's really hard. If you look deep enough, anybody who lived in the 18th century or the 19th century, they must have done something wrong. You look deep enough, everybody did something that got somebody else angry. I'm not making light of changing the names of things for people who were who had bad histories, but I notice no one wants to change the name of the Chicago Blackhawks, but that's because the chief is portrayed with honor. As opposed to, the Cleveland Indian with the stupid smile.
Yeah. Or the Redskins. There are certain ways of saying it that are definitely, we may say, more inappropriate than others.
Joe, you're not
thought we're the
making a
Panthers.
suggestion, are you?
Not at all. I think
Thank you.
Panthers are,
By the way,
Panthers are fine.
The same thing goes for what you want to call October the 12th. Whether to have the Good Friday holiday or not, those are just very sensitive issues that are local ones that need to be resolved by whatever local standards apply.
Interesting. Thank you.
Glenn, I think one of the important points for you guys, and why it's really important for us to be a member of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, is that as a school committee person, you can call MASC at any time, and within seconds, you will be talking to someone who knows Massachusetts school law, and it's extremely valuable as a resource for all of us.
There is that rare group of people who are school committee junkies.
Is that you guys?
Sorry to admit. That's our hobby. All right.
Dear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Dr.
Chair,
Bowles?
I'd just like to thank Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. I've learned some things tonight and reinforced some things. So a nice presentation and I appreciate it. Good job.
Thank you, Mary.
Here, here.
Thank you.
We look forward to
Yep.
recruiting you as an interim superintendent very shortly.
Yeah.
Careful, Mary.
Hey,
Yeah.
I work for MSAC. Very
she changed her
interesting.
mind. You didn't hear that? You didn't hear she changed her mind? You're Shirley forever.
Yeah. That was very good. Thank you.
Anybody from anybody else? Thank you, Jonathan, for setting this up. It was very valuable.
Yeah,
And, you know, you say, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, oh yeah. So, but it never hurts to refresh it. Any questions of us, Glenn, that, you know, since we are all such talented school committee people, we might. I would entertain a motion to adjourn unless there's any objections.
so moved.
Second,
There's a second, okay, Michelle, I hope, are you still here? We'll do a roll
I'm still
call vote,
here.
please. Thank you. It's 8:51.
Mr. DeForge,
Aye.
Mrs. Granger,
aye.
Mr. Leone,
Aye.
Mr. Quinty,
Aye.
Mrs. Reshoots,
Aye,
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
that is unanimous, and we are adjourned at 8:50.